Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, folks, wherever you are. We have people from varied industries joining us from different locations. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. I hope you all are doing safe. Anna and I are, this is Abhijit Nafle. I'm based out of New Jersey, and both Anna and I welcome you to our second educational webinar, which is around transforming classroom training. Some of the best practices and examples is what we will show you. Before we get started, just a quick check on certain things that we've tried to do. One is that for obvious reasons, your mic and video are disabled throughout the webinar, but there is a chat window which is available at the bottom of the screen, which you can use it throughout the session to ask any questions. And at the end of the session, this particular presentation, as well as curated content from Q&A sessions, will be emailed to all the registered attendees. Having said that, I'm going to turn it over to Anna, who's going to walk you through the rest of the webinar.
Great. Thanks, Abhijit. Hi, everyone. I'm Anna Kuhl. Welcome and thanks for joining us today. I'm just going to stay on video for a few moments so everybody can get a chance to see me, and then I'm going to turn it off just for bandwidth purposes. I know that we're still getting several people registered and joining us in the webinar, so we'll take a moment here to give everybody else a chance to join. But just so you know, today's session is a little bit of a follow-on. Some of you joined us last week. If you didn't, that's okay. We talked last week about how to facilitate online and some of the tips and tricks that are important when you need to do a live online facilitation for classes, training, webinars, etc. So this week we're going to transition into some of the additional questions that we tend to get asked, which are, what do you do with the content? How do you take an in-person classroom training and make it relevant in a virtual environment where we can't all join together? So we'll start today just talking about why MPS Interactive knows about this, and then we'll define what we mean by transforming from in-person to online. We'll talk about best practices and approaches, and then take a look at some real examples just to give you a sense of variety on some of the different ways that you can make that transformation happen. So thanks for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and turn the video off now and get us started. So MPS Interactive, we're almost 30 years old, and the reason that we are able to share some of the insight that we have with you, able to share examples and best practices, is because we focus primarily on learning, especially digital learning. So we have a lot of different examples, clients globally, and a really good background in how to present information and bring information live, whether it's in the classroom or whether it's in a digital and blended hybrid environment. We also think it's kind of fun to share with you who else is in the audience. It's a little bit disconcerting to join a webinar like this where your audio and video is restricted. We do that, of course, for security for both you and for us, because we don't know everybody who's joining. And that's just a best practice for general public webinars. So manufacturing, hospitality, education, finance, service providers, healthcare, those are just some of the industries who have registered with us today. And we also have other folks that are general training practitioners who are joining us. So thank you all, and just be aware that everybody seems to be on boat right now with the global situation, trying to figure out what's the best way that we can continue to train and help our employees and students learn, especially if we can't get together in person. So let's define what we mean from in-person classes and workshops to virtual and online. This can be, for example, something that you might do in a conference room. It could be a larger auditorium, might be your classroom that you have either for corporate or for education. And we're going to focus more on corporate examples and education after high school, so community college and university, not as much on K through 12, though there is some applicability if you are here and looking for K through 12 information. Now, virtual and online is interesting, right? So you can do what we're doing here, which is live facilitated. That means somebody is leading the session and trying to coordinate information between participants. Online can also bring in some additional elements. There's lots of ways to convert and transform your in-person training. That doesn't mean you have to put it all into one set of slides that you post and talk to and people just listen and take notes. There are people who, you know, are attempting to do that. It's maybe not the best practice. And so what we hope to offer you here today are some examples of options for how to make some hybrid programs and be able to make sure that you get that learning and training still in a good way. Yes.
I'm sorry. I just got getting messages that people cannot hear us as such, and they just they're saying that there is a recording that is being played. For folks who are on the call, there is a chat button. If people can, someone just respond back if you can hear any one of us. Right, you can hear me fine. Anna can. Okay, you can hear both of them. All right. Okay. I'm sorry. All right, so that's good to know. Thank you again.
Thanks for the check. Appreciate that. That's a good check. Okay, wonderful. So let's get a chance to actually communicate with each other a little bit. Using that chat window, which clearly some of you have already found, we'd like you to answer a question for us or share some information. What do you think is tricky or confusing or potentially challenging about transforming from an in-person classroom environment to online? If you aren't sure where the chat window is, if you're on PC, there's usually a floating toolbar at the bottom. If you're on a mobile device, you might find it by tapping the screen and seeing chat. If you take a moment now to just locate that chat and then share with us in that chat window any thoughts you have about what's tricky. And I'm just going to share because you guys might not be able to see all of the comments, but keeping trainees engaged, minimizing technical errors is always a challenge for taking things online. Absolutely. Any other thoughts about what's tricky or challenging about moving or transforming from in-person to online?
So one very interesting thing is coming up is how do you keep the audience, make sure that the audience is attentive and they're paying attention to what you're presenting.
Yeah, excellent point. Trying to make sure that people are engaged. Some of the interesting things about that are in your tools, depending on the platform you're using as a host, you often have the opportunity to see who's actually paying attention and interacting with the screen. But in addition to that, some of the facilitation techniques we talked about last week are really important for making sure that you can call on people and make sure that the silence isn't causing people to be distracted, so actually engaging. Let's do a poll now. Abhijit's going to pull a poll up online. Which of these techniques work both in person and online? So on your screen, you'll see a poll. Please take a few minutes to look at these and say, which of these work both in person and online in your opinion? Go ahead and begin polling. We'll give it just a few more minutes for others to answer.
Perfect. So we have a poll that ends in about 5 seconds. About 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I'm just going to end the polling right now and share the results with everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, Abhijit. Okay, so this is interesting. We've got some pretty good spread across. Hands-on and role play are the two that got the least votes for working in both environments. So we'll talk about the challenges related to those. Discussions, games, quizzes, and team assignments all look like people feel like they can be used online. Fantastic. Okay. Thanks for participating in both the chat and the polls. Let's take some of that forward. When we're talking about transforming from in-person to online, some of the things that can easily stay the same, that you just start from the same place, is what are your objectives? Who's your audience? What do you need to teach? And so understanding what level of Bloom's taxonomy you need to get to in your program is going to help you with the types of activities that you would add, or what you'll do with your content, or how you might create hybrid activities and materials that go along with a live facilitated session. So those don't necessarily change. Things that maybe need some minor tweaks but still work pretty well in a facilitated live session are your icebreakers. What's an example of how that might have to change? Normally when we're in a room together and we do some sort of icebreaker like, hey, tell me 2 truths and a falsehood, and then let us figure out which one it is. You know, simple icebreakers like that, or tell us what your nickname is. You take visual cues and about who goes next, normally speaking. When you're in a facilitated online, visual cues, body language, eye contact, even with videos are harder. So you make slight adjustments to call on people or give an assigned order. Other things that we've talked about are your actual materials like flip charts and post-it notes. You can still use things like that. In your facilitated online, you just need to make them the whiteboards that are part of your tool, or have people prepare and present additional materials either in a breakout room or in separate sessions. Games, hands-on activities, and role plays still work. They have to be adjusted, as does small group work if you have breakout rooms as part of your tool, and discussions if you give some guidance on how and when people can jump into the discussion. Because again, the fact that you're not sure when somebody else is going to talk is some of the things that lead people to being disengaged. Things that don't really work in facilitated online is that your body language clues, your eye contact, you can still have some of that with video, but you need to make extra checks. Physical materials. What if you need to train somebody how to do something with a piece of equipment? For example, one of the items we're going to take a look at is manufacturing and IT. What if your reason for being in person is because you need hands-on time with a piece of equipment? So let's look at alternatives for ways we can still do that in an online, digital, and remote environment. So we'll do that in just a moment. And then last week we talked about workbooks and handouts. Be really cautious about dividing the attention. It is difficult for us to mentally pay attention to information on the screen, somebody talking, and a separate printed or online file. So you want to give people dedicated time for any workbook or handout materials. Other best practices. We believe that 30 to 60 minutes of collaborative sessions is a critical time for moving things online, and a maximum session of about 90 minutes. So we get asked all the time, if I have a 4-hour in-person class, how much time should I plan for that to be online? And our answer is this: try not to go over 90 minutes in any single session. If you look out in the industry today, you're going to find lots of programs where people are asking you to sit there for 3 hours, 4 hours in a live facilitated session. And that can work, but it can only work if you are allowing your participants to have a lot more engagement, collaboration, and control over the content and interaction than in a session like we're doing today, where Abhijit and I have most of the control. So we suggest that you look at your maximum session times as 90 facilitated, but also that you look at alternate delivery options. Really maximize ways to present information, whether that's through readings, online tutorials or web courses, forums, and team meetings that are done outside of the live facilitated session, simulations, online games, podcasts. There are a variety of things that you can do to take the content that you normally teach today in person in class, still deliver it, but not deliver all of it in a facilitated live session. So what we're really suggesting is, where possible, look for opportunities to flip the materials, where you present basics before class, maybe through pre-reads or courses. You provide sustaining materials, application, hands-on type opportunities outside of just the live session, and that you use your expertise through facilitation subject matter expert to really apply, coach, answer questions, do activities together in that live facilitated session that utilize the time of the experts and the participants the best. And then converting physical tasks, things you actually have to do with a physical piece of equipment or material or product, those are going to be really critical in your transformation. So we'll take a look at some examples of that as well. And don't forget, you got to be ready for the silence. Even in a situation where you don't have your classroom muted, or you don't have your webinar muted, You want to be aware that silence doesn't always mean people aren't listening or paying attention. Sometimes it means they're thinking and it feels like it takes longer. So do call on people, give people a chance to know when it's okay to speak and not speak, but also be aware that when you ask a question, sometimes they just need a few minutes and that silence comes across a little longer than it feels in person. So let's take another poll here. Based on some of the approaches we talked about for other delivery opportunities, what are some of these that Abhijit's going to pull up on this screen here? Which of these are interesting to you? Which would you be most interested in trying? So on the screen, you've got a poll. Please go ahead and read and then make your choice.
So we've got about 25% of the people who started voting. The numbers are going up. I'm going to close the poll in about 5 seconds, which is starting from now. 5, 4, 3. It's interesting to see everyone racing to finish the poll. 2, 1. And I'm going to end the polling now and share the results for you, Anna.
Truthfully, it's more interesting for the hosts because the participants can't actually see the voting happening at the same time, but we're watching it and it is fun. So if you can share the results with us, everybody can get a chance to see. So our choices are breakout rooms, flipped classroom, pre-work. We are getting, just so you guys know why it's not showing up, we are getting a small technical error. This is not unusual when you're going online. So breakout rooms got 50% of the vote. Flipped classroom got 33% of the vote. Social assignments got 8%, and nobody voted for pre-work or program web pages. So let's talk a little bit about some of these different components a little bit more and see where that takes us. So I'm going to just share on the screen with you our first example of a program that we helped our client convert. It was originally provided only to managers in the organization, and it was 2 days facilitated in person. So what you're seeing here on the screen is, and I'm just going to annotate it here for a second. Right here at this level, where it goes across the bottom in blue. I know that's a lovely annotation, right? But that level is for managers who might have gone through the in-person training. You wanted to still allow them some refresher and sustainment. So the baseline of the program is built around a game. And you take a pre-test, and you can either pass it and then proceed to the first level of the game, then the second, then the third, and the fourth. As you pass each one, those are concepts that you would have learned in the facilitated training. But then the program, in order to scale it, is also offered to individual contributors who didn't have a chance to do this in person. So everybody gets a little pre-work which reminds you about the concepts in the training. Individual contributors can take the test because it does give you feedback and helps set context about each of the topics. Then they go into online modules. So WBT is web-based training. It's also called iTutorial, online module, online course, where you learn the concepts, after which you graduate and go through the game, which tests your knowledge and allows you to apply it. You continue to do this in a series, and there are also 4 social assignments for that section. Once you've graduated out from the courses and the 4 levels of the game, individual contributors would then go to a live facilitated webinar where you are coached on some of the particular key messages. There's a Q&A session and a short application exercise. Once you leave that live facilitated webinar, which is about 90 minutes, you had 3 more social assignments available to you. So that is a really complex design that allows for different audiences and their needs, as well as how far they were in the program, scaling it out, and using both facilitated in person as well as digital and online assets. Let's look at another example. Second example here is okay. So second example is a program that was originally designed for days 1 and 2 in-person, facilitated in the classroom for an average of 20 participants. After those first 2 days where they covered content in modules 1 and 2, they would go away for 6 weeks and do some on-the-job application, then come back into a classroom for 2 more days for modules 3 and 4. That program needed to be taken to an entirely facilitated, live facilitated session. So we redesigned it. We put together a program webpage where all the components for the program, including social assignments, were located. We carefully analyzed the content, and I'll show you what I mean in our next slide about how we did that. For those of you who are looking for that, okay, that's what you can do, but how do you do it? We'll take a little glance at it. But essentially, for modules 1 and 2, we ended up breaking them into 4 90-minute sessions. So module 1 would be 2 90-minute sessions. And we also reduced the class size so that you had a little bit more one-on-one high-touch fidelity to, instead of 20 people in person, 10 people online. We reduced the 6 weeks applying on the job to about 2 weeks, and we added in digital sustainment resources, which I'll show you in just a moment. And then 4 more 90-minute facilitated live sessions, or WebEx type sessions, that covered modules 3 and 4. So that's how we moved it from in-person classroom to facilitated virtual. But then these additional elements, sustainment, refresher components in microlearning, were also essential. So that same web hub had a combination of videos, short videos, infographic, interactive PDFs, online learning activities, and social assignments on the platform of their choice was SAP Jam. So those components were used as additional components for the virtual facilitation, but also after you graduated the program, you could go back and refresh from those elements. So a really nice hybrid program there that had a virtual facilitation focus. Now, how did we do that? First things first, when you're looking at transforming content, you want to analyze the current state program and really understand your objectives, the materials, and the audience. So if your audience needs to and can easily, as in this example, be able to meet with you in a virtual facilitated session and do everything else digitally, great. You need to plan for the technology and the audience and your facilitator capacity. So this goes back to answering the question of how long can a session be? If you don't have enough facilitators based on your total audience to be able to offer 90-minute sessions, you may need to increase that time. So you do have some planning for those live sessions to make sure you have enough facilitators or subject matter expert presenters to be able to support the number of sessions you create. The second thing is really analyzing your information and your content. So in this case, we went through those modules and chunked them out into 90-minute segments. Task by task, slide by slide, content by content, what would fit into 90 minutes. We identified and flagged the practice and in-person activities from the current state materials so that we would know those were our focus areas that we needed to transform to either work in the facilitated environment online or to be a digital asset that people could use outside of that facilitated session. Then we designed and converted those, updated facilitator guides, slides, which need to be completely redone for a live facilitated session, workbooks, and we rewrote the facilitator guides and instructions. We hear time and time again that if you've got a virtual program, it needs to have one central place to access all your materials. So when we say build a program webpage, that way your participants know exactly where to go to get any pre-work, to get any assignments, to find any other materials, the links in the calendar session, the agenda for what they need to do next. Even your online programs like Udemy, Coursera, etc., have one page where you can go to get all the information you need for a session. So your communications can go there. And then the third component of how do you do this is train your trainers. Give them call outs to specific converted activities and a chance to practice those in the tool that you've selected for your particular environment. It's very important to practice in the tool that you're going to use and then pilot and refine those activities. That's all elements of how we did that program. The third example is from a community college where we applied learn, explore, and practice in a flipped classroom. So this community college still had in-person classes plus recorded classes, online courses, WBTs. You could attend a lecture, you would have readings, you had both in-person physical labs as well as virtual labs. So if you were not able to be in that physical lab and or you needed additional time to practice with a piece of equipment, you could do it in the virtual lab through AR, simulation, and VR. So quite a nice combination here of using multiple techniques to be able to pull things from strictly in person and in front of a piece of equipment to online. And so we thought we'd show some of the pictures, just a quick screen cap. If you have a piece of equipment or something physical that you have to teach that is generally why you're working together in person, good substitutes for that are online tutorials, real life video, augmented reality, and virtual reality so that you can actually engage and try and practice to manipulate and apply the process, steps, and knowledge with that particular equipment. The last example I'm going to give you here is if you go out to trainingindustry.com, if you didn't join us back in July, we did a special session with Frito-Lay about their Everyday Selling series. It's a wonderful series that allowed people to watch a series of videos, be supported by resources and materials, and discuss it in regularly planned meetings so they didn't have to schedule separate training. It's beautifully scalable now. If you are not able to be in person, you still have all those resources on one digital site. You can watch those videos, have discussion materials available that you could do in a live facilitated session as well. So those are 4 quick examples to show you of ways that you can transform and give you hopefully some good insight and ideas about how to transform from in-person classroom to online. I'm just gonna give us one more chance to share together now in your chat window before we close out. What are you inspired to try next based on some of the things that we've looked here today? If you'd open up your chat window and share with us for just a moment, what's interesting or what did you see that you would like to try to incorporate in your transformation?
We will give it a couple of minutes for people to make sure that they're able to type. And as I just sent a message to everyone, there has been a technical glitch, so everyone's name is just the same. It would really help us if any of your comments, you can just add your initials, which is the letter from your first name and last name, will help us identify as well.
So we've got some initial responses. Augmented reality is of interest to one of our participants in the audience. Anything else that you saw today that really is interesting to you that maybe you hadn't considered putting in to your transformed training? Give us a moment in the window to chat now. Knowledge checks. See a couple other comments there. Items from example 2, interactive PDFs as performance support. Great. Very nice. Interactive PDFs are so helpful in a lot of ways because they allow you to provide layered and condensed information to your participants so that they're able to quickly access it for both learning and for refresh and performance support. That's a great example.
So,
all right.
So one of the things, Anna, that has come out was in one of your presentations, you had how you converted the classroom trainings into small multiple learning modalities, which included interactive PDFs, the info animation. So that's inspiring, and that's a great idea.
Great. Well, thank you guys for sharing some of the things you're inspired about or interested in trying. We're going to stick around, Abhijit and I, for just a few moments to answer any additional questions you have. For those of you, to be respectful of your time, those of you who need to go ahead and drop, please know that we have another webinar coming up that you can register for, and we'll be sending you a copy of materials to the email that you provided when you registered for this particular session. I want to thank you so much for your time, and if you do have additional questions, please feel free. We'll stick around for a couple minutes and answer those in the chat window. Thank you very much for anybody who needs to drop. And if you have questions, we'll open the chat window now. Okay, one question that we have is, When you're doing the analysis of existing content, how do you decide what to, what to convert? And so again, we'll go back to the concept that you want to stick with what your audience needs are and what type of technology they have, as well as what you're trying to convey. So if you need to move up that Bloom's taxonomy from just knowledge and awareness to actual application and synthesis, then the activities that you create, whether they're for the virtual session or the online session, are going to need to allow participants to address those. So you would design your time for those particular activities either in the session, and that will increase the amount of session time, or you'll be able to take a look at opportunities like simulation, online courses, other materials that you can create that will allow people to do that. They maybe aren't doing it exactly in the time that you guys are together in the facilitated session. So use your digital online tools as a hybrid way to approach that. Have any other questions?
So there's one question that's come up on application training. The question is that our application is in development stage right now. It goes live in July. So the training was planned to be in a classroom environment, but given the current situation, we want to deploy it online. So any tips or best practices that you can share?
So application training is so interesting. There are some really great ways to teach people the fundamentals of how to use the application, but where everybody gets stuck is the on-the-job aspect. Like, how does this apply to me and what I need to know? So frequently, the reason that we pull people into the classroom is because application training is created at the very high level. These are the steps 1, 2, 3, but the information about what does it mean, what information do you put in the application or the system, is often left to the subject matter expert to tell you in person. So a couple of recommendations we would have for you. Create some basic primer training that people can take online. It doesn't necessarily have to be a facilitated session. It can be recorded application training. There's wonderful tools out there to do that. Some great standards are to show and then allow the participant to try. So you want to put out information and communications up front as an enterprise. Why are you implementing the system? What's important about it? What's in it for me? Then allow them to take this online digital training to understand the basics of it. And when you bring them into a facilitated session, a virtual facilitated session, use smaller groups, try to align those groups closer to the business unit or role so that you can have very specific information that you can tie tips, hints, best practices, what type of data you would use in that role for that part of the system. Those are some of the 3 best practices that we would recommend for systems and applications training. Thank you for that question. Are there any other questions at this time? Okay, I think we're good. Do you have any more there, Abhijit?
There are a couple of more questions, but in the interest of everyone's time, what we're going to do is that we'll take all this information, the questions that you have, we'll have a curated response from Anna and the other experts, and we will share it across early next week with all the participants on this webinar.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for your participation and your questions today. We appreciate your time and your involvement. Have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Oh, thank you, folks.